Well, welcome back to another episode of This Crazy Life. I am one of your co-hosts, Austin, and this is my other co-host, Tara.
Your mother.
Yes, my mother, or maybe I'm your co-host. We go back and forth. Yep. We've got a very special episode today. What are we talking about?
Well, everybody, we have done a few episodes now, and we've showed our mother-son dynamic as quirky as it is.
As wild as it is.
But we promised you right from the beginning that we would have full transparency.
Mm-hmm.
That, we're a family like millions of other families. We've got high highs and we've got some low lows. And today what we wanted to do, everybody, was to share with our amazing viewers, audience,
Our wonderful viewers,
your personal struggle in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna focus my attention on you, everybody, because I think what we're trying to do in this podcast is to really show that it can happen anytime, any place, anywhere.
Yep.
The perfect family, dysfunctional families, it doesn't matter.
No.
Your journey that you're going to start talking about, what I find very, very interesting is, yes, mental health can be from genetics. It does it run in the family, but it also can just happen. And you felt like it was time to kind of share your story. So not only is it going to be about the night, it's difficult to talk about.
It's a little heavy, but...
But we're also going to show everybody the light, right?
Absolutely.
And how... when somebody is like yourself working through a mental health journey, how the role of the parent, siblings, family, friends really come into play.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll lead you into the discussion.
Absolutely.
This is your show. But it did start, and I'll just start from the moment of when you had a moment of, is life worth living?
Mm-hmm.
Bear with us. We don't talk about this publicly. We talk about this a lot ourselves.
Yeah.
Ourselves. We have to, right? To keep you on the right journey,
Absolutely.
the right path to light. It was April the 4th. I will never forget it. Mm-hmm. It was 10 years ago. We did figure that out. It's hard to believe it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You always, I want to preface this a little bit. You always were a child, a little bit more on the introverted side.
That's true. That's very true.
Loved by everybody, very popular in school, but you never needed a lot of friends.
No, for sure. I always had like that, from public school to high school, I always had like that group of 4 or 5 friends that I would hang out with. And I always got along with everyone else, but I always had a pretty small friend group.
You just didn't have a need to be in a circle of 50 people that you called your best friends.
Yeah, and I think a lot of introverts are like that, honestly. Like, the people we click with, we click with. Like, we are set for...
And you're good.
We're set for life, yeah.
Exactly. So the reason that I'm kind of saying this to our viewers is because it was not, as your mother, it was not unusual for you to go to school, come home, and be quiet. Mm-hmm. You weren't anybody, you weren't a child that had 10 friends come over every night. that spent the time on your cell phone talking to your friends. You were very good to be in the house surrounded by your family and just be quiet and do what made you happy.
Yeah.
So this night, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. I was in college at the time. I was in a program that I wasn't really enjoying. And legitimately, I just woke up at 3 in the morning and I had what my therapist would later tell me was a full-on panic attack, where I was just full-on crisis mode of what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I had all these negative emotions running it through me, and I had a moment where I literally just stormed down to the kitchen and I just started rummaging through our pantry and I just grabbed a bottle of Tylenol. And I'm being very frank about this, more than I usually am, but that's because I think it needs to be said. And I just opened the bottle and I was like emptying it into my hand and I was just looking at it like, do I just chug it all right now and just let it be over? And I was stuck there for a while, just looking at this. And frankly, I just had this thought of, amidst all the negativity, which I'll get into a bit more later, sort of what I think was leading up to this, but I just thought, my mom's in the bedroom upstairs right now. What happens if I do this? And that was my moment of, in all the darkness, I just had that brief moment of, stop right now.
Yeah. I
put the pills back. I sealed it up. I was still like shaking. I was a mess, but I had that moment of, okay, I can't ignore this anymore. I need help and I need it right now.
Yeah.
Which is a terrible thing to go through, but I think I consider myself fortunate in a way because a lot of people don't ever get to have that realization, you know?
Well, we've learned that, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was that moment that you came upstairs.
Yeah.
And you woke me up.
Yep.
And you said, Mom. And I'm like, what? What's going on?
Yeah.
And you said, I'm about to end my life.
Yeah.
Right. A moment that nobody can imagine. Not your kid, right?
Yeah.
So what we're sharing today is how you came to that moment. Of course, you know, I got right up. We went right downstairs.
Yeah, we had a long talk.
Got you water.
Dead
water,
in the morning, yeah.
And I think as what I want to share with everybody is not only your journey through this, but how it became really important for me to help you through this and know that what I was doing was right.
Yeah.
You know, what I will never forget, you know, as much as I think when you get older, your memory fails you a little bit, as we all can see. I mean, definitely. These are moments that are embedded. So you came downstairs, I got you water, I sat you down, and I'm like, I was shocked. And as a mother, as a parent, I think sometimes some parents, they see the signs, you know, for me, and you were living with me at that time, full time.
Yeah.
I didn't know because you were so normally quiet in your own way.
Yeah.
I would never have been able to have ever said, I think he's suicidal. You know, you didn't give me those immediate signs that others do.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up because in talks I've had with people that with depression or even suicidal tendencies, and you hear parents talk about it all the time. That's something you do hear a lot, which is, I never thought that he was actually suicidal or she was or it was that bad. And I think it's important for parents not to blame themselves for that, because what I have learned speaking from people with depression and seeing stories of depression is that unfortunately we tend to be pretty good actors. We tend to do our best to make sure that people don't really see just what's going on up here, because what's a very common line of thought with depression is that you're a burden on people. You're a burden on the people around you. So what your brain does is it goes, well, if you share that with them, you're just becoming even more of a burden. You can't let them see that. You just have to.
Is that how you
down.
felt at that time?
It absolutely was.
We've always been very close, but you felt sharing that would have created more of a burden on me.
That's definitely how I felt. And I will say, the human brain, incredibly complex thing. So many things we don't know about it. Man, it can be stupid sometimes.
Well, it's, your brain during that was not well.
No.
How can your brain function on any logical note when it has? So I'm going to go back, because I think it's important for people to understand the steps that we did together during that night. The rest of that night, early morning, you had what I would call a complete breakdown. Once you got the words out to me, I held you, and you. I've never seen it. A complete breakdown.
Yeah. Now I'll admit, from after I came to you and told you about it, a lot of what happened in like the minutes and hours after that is kind of a haze for me.
Is it?
So if you don't mind, like, could you talk a little bit about what it was like in the immediate after?
Just kept my.
I've got on spare. I've got on spare if you need.
Let me just get my tissue. 10 years later, and
sorry to put you in that position, but
don't be sorry.
Even like immediately after, honestly, like a lot of that night was a haze from after I had that snap out of it moment.
This is a very interesting moment, and yes, I will walk you through it, because when you started having your meltdown, you were sobbing uncontrollably. It had to have been nothing less than 40 to 45 minutes on my shoulder. I feel like at that moment, because you had spoke the words that you had been feeling for I don't even know how long, even though it all came to fruition that night, I feel like there was a sense of now your entire body and soul was just getting it all out on my shoulder. And as your parent, all you want to do is make this go away for you. I have got to fix this. But dealing with somebody that feels like their life is not worth living, now I'm faced with, if I say the wrong thing, what is he going to do? And it became that night a real dilemma. So all I could do was just hold you, let you get it all out. And then I'm thinking, I have to let my son know how much he matters.
It's okay. Take your time. Take your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I grabbed you by your by your shirt, and I shook you, and I said, I cannot live without you. Don't do this. And I have never begged for anything.
Oh, you're not a beggar.
I am not a beggar. But I was begging you. And I remember going through that conversation with you and thinking, I don't think he's hearing me, right? And then you became very, very tired. You were completely exhausted. You wanted to go to bed. And that's where I feel this is going to be a good episode for people that have gone through this. Because now that, oh my goodness, what's in my house? What can he use to harm himself with? I've got to clear everything out of here. I've got to protect my son, and I cannot have him leave my sight for 1 minute. Came into fray, right? So it's, you know, you go, you lie down, and right away we had to get you help. Let's just bounce. There's a lot of in-betweens, you know, who do I tell, who I don't tell, because this was your story. But it was about getting you help. So you did say you did not want to go to the hospital. I did call a helpline when you were sleeping because our doctor's office was closed. It was a Sunday.
Of course it was.
And they said, if you can keep him safe, you know, if you go to a hospital's going to hold him for 72 hours because of self-harm. If you think he's going to do something and you're not going to be able to stop him, you've got to get him to a hospital. And you and I talked about that. And you said, I'll be right with you, Mom. I won't leave your side. And so we made the decision to go at 8:30 the next morning and walk into our GP on the Monday morning, which we did. And she saw you on your own. And came out and then got me because you were 19. You had to give permission. And then you immediately that week got into a therapist.
Yes. And that's something I slightly remember about the doctor's office is at that moment, I was very strongly felt in need of, can I get on medication now? Can I get some antidepressant pills or things like that? But we talked about it, and in the end, we decided against it. Here's the thing. Antidepressants, medications, things like that, they can be very helpful for people in certain cases, and I think you should always have conversations with your family and with your doctor about them. They can also be very, very intense, and it can take a long time to find the medications that are right for you.
Oh, most definitely.
And in the meantime, they can really toy with sort of how your mind functions, and it can be a difficult process. I think you should absolutely still talk about them and make sure that they're right for you and look into it. But in the end, we decided we're going to try to go with a therapist. I'm going to be more open about it, and we're going to see whether I can work my way through this. And if we're having trouble, then we'll go more along the medication route, which in the end is a route that I'm glad that we went with, because I do think going to the therapist ended up being very helpful.
It was. I remember the doctor, and I just want to clarify this. It wasn't that she didn't want to put you on medication. It was, I want him to talk to a therapist first. Get a report from the therapist before I just randomly shove medication down you. And I respected that, because anybody that is on those, and I know a lot of people on them. It does take a while to find that right fit. More importantly for you at that time, Austin, was getting you somewhere so that you would not want to self-harm yourself. Starting that path. What I did was now, and this is the struggle, this is the reality of having a child that feels that life isn't worth living, was I realized very quickly that I could not help you without now me getting help. And I went to the local mental health society. I asked if they had any support groups. And I knew very quickly, because when you would go to sleep at night, I would go in your room every half hour to make sure you were still breathing. When you were having a shower, if you were too long, I would be like, oh my God, did I get all the razors out of there? You know, and it became very strong, knowing a very strong reality that me panicking every time you're alone is not helping you. So I was able to talk to one of the heads of the Mental Health Society where we live in our region. And my very close friend, Matt, came with me. He was like, you're not going alone. I'm coming with you. And from that moment, meeting with the director, when I called, I didn't expect to. I just wanted to know, you know, what's the support groups? Like, I need to join a support group. This has just happened 2 days ago. And she was like, I want to talk to you right now. This is not about support groups. You can join those down the road, but you need help to help your son. And when Matt came with me and we sat there, it was very interesting when I started hearing the stats of people that do experience feeling like their life is not worth living. And I remember her saying to me, there is no cure. Right. Just even therapy, all the therapy in the world puts them on the right path. It puts everybody to a pathway of light from darkness. But when that darkness, those thoughts enter, the way the brain works is it will cause those thoughts to re-enter again. Yeah. And I remember her holding my hand and saying, as much as your son will get better and will look like he's different, he's good, he's fixed, she said he's not. He never will be. And that's what most parents make the mistake. Is you're not living what if. I'm not living with you going, when's the next day gonna come? But I'm living with you as your parent, prepared. Right. If and when there is another day. Yeah. And that was a really important moment for me, because I think when people do go to therapy, it's really easy when you see somebody doing better to go, oh, wow, they're so good now. And then when they have a bad day, it's hard for people to process it.
Yeah, it's like, oh, but they were going to therapy. Everything was fine.
You were good. Yeah. You were so good. So now let's take a message from that. Because you have done really well. You did 9 months of therapy every single week. Yeah. And I do remember your therapist saying to you, Austin, I think you don't need to come. Yeah. I think you're okay right now. Yeah. Right? And you worked hard to become okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 9 months.
But we have had days. Yep. Yeah. So maybe you can walk everybody through. Everything's going okay. You know, you're lighter, you're brighter, and I'm talking about your shade of darkness. What have you noticed being some of the triggers for you to now have days where maybe you're close to having those thoughts again?
Well, one thing I can say very proudly, thankfully, is that ever since that day, I've never had a moment where I felt that bad again. However, I have had my fair share of days where I was not okay mentally. Oftentimes, I think what it comes down to, and I mentioned this briefly before, is those feelings of just being a burden, like I'm just making other people's lives more difficult, which can be something as fleeting as like a mistake I make while I'm at work, or feeling like, oh, maybe I should be doing more when I'm doing this, or, oh, I couldn't make this person's get together or whatever it might be. It's just, the problem is that when you get right down to it, a lot of the things that maybe would set me off, in the grand scheme of things, are things that are like, okay, well, whatever. But my brain doesn't treat it.
Not for you.
Like, whatever.
Yeah.
What I think I described it to you as, when I was trying to describe it, is like there's almost like a little voice in the back of your head where it's constantly just in any conversation or event where something happens and it's just like, oh, you know you're just making life harder for them, right? Oh, you know
That's how you feel.
Yeah. Oh, you know they're just saying that. You're just making things difficult. And it's a quiet voice, so usually it's like, okay, shut up. I'm trying to live my life here. But it's always there.
It doesn't go away.
It's always there,
Right.
and it's always, in every mistake you make, it just gets that little bit louder. And then sooner or later, it just builds up and it piles on, and eventually it just results in a day where I'm just like, oh, this is not good.
And sometimes you wake up that way too.
Yeah, and sometimes I wake up that way. And the thing is, it also just sort of impacts how you live your life. Like, you
Yes.
start getting less sleep. You just lose all your energy. You stop feeling hungry. What I think a lot of people who maybe aren't the most informed about depression, not to say it's their fault or anything, they assume depression, they associate it with sadness. With like being hysterically crying, things like that. You're just
Yeah.
like, no, everything's terrible. And that can be a way it manifests. But from my experience and from what I've seen of a lot of others, it's actually more like apathy. Like, you just slowly things just stop mattering for you, honestly. And you just sort of feel empty more than anything.
That's how I would describe you when you're having, we call them dark days.
Dark days or bad
Yeah.
days or whatever you want to call them. And
Yeah.
thankfully, you, my friends, the rest of my family, Dad, Andrew, they've been great when it's come to understanding that sort of thing. Because oftentimes what I've seen in cases where people do handle it poorly is, okay, you're having a dark mental day. Why don't you just go out and do something you like? I wish that could solve that, but you
Yeah.
just, like,
Yeah.
what's my go-to hobby? Playing video games. So it's like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Why don't I just turn the PlayStation 5 on and just start playing that? I can, but I just feel nothing. And then it just reinforces that feeling of, oh,
see
okay,
that.
yeah, something's
Yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
I think there are some techniques that we've learned. I learned this through my own therapy, through the mental health, as well as my own therapist. I remember one time you woke up and it was not a good day.
Yeah.
And so what I've learned to do is we create a list.
Yes, the lists.
We create a list. So, I highly recommend when you're having those days, it's not like you want to talk all the time. You are very closed off. You are very quieter.
Yeah.
And you are, I would best describe it as empty.
Yeah.
You're very empty. So we always sit down at a table.
Mhm.
And I take a piece of paper and I take a pen and I put a line down the middle, and we have pros and we have cons.
Yeah.
And I write it. And then I say, okay, today is not a good day. I want you to tell me all the reasons why today is bad for you. What are the cons that are making you feel like your life may not be worth living?
Yeah.
And you tell me what those are. You always do. Sometimes they're similar, sometimes they're different. But, I would say, Austin, because we've done this a few times, that we write the cons down. Maybe there's 5.
Sure.
Sure. It's never a big list.
Yeah.
And then I say to you, okay, my son, now let's go through everything good in your life. Everything good that's happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And we write down people. We write down where we live. We write down your jobs. We write down when you were working with the talent agency, we started writing down all of the jobs that you had gotten.
Mm-hmm.
What is always the pros list compared to the cons?
Oh, not even close. It's always
Triple.
Triple.
Quadruple.
Triple on a bad day. Usually it's more. Yeah.
So our pros list is always long. Our cons list is like this.
Yeah.
And it's those few things that are making you feel so dark. So when we go through the pros and the cons list, I always say to you, read out loud.
Yeah.
All of the good, right?
Yeah.
And like I say, the good involves all the good.
Oh.
Did you have a
yeah.
good meal last night? Oh, well, we're going to write that down, right? That sweater you're wearing, is that the best Christmas present you ever had? Yeah, we're writing that down.
That's the other sweater. That's the other sweater.
I bought you that one too.
This one's second place.
Yeah.
Probably.
So then we take the list and we put it on your wall in your bedroom so that you can look at it.
Yeah.
And that always, Austin, when I watch you look at the difference between the two columns, you always look at me and go, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah. Because I think that's actually a great thing that we do is putting it to paper. Because the thing is, like, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, those bad things, like, sure, they're bad and they feel bad. But when you actually put it down and put it next to all the good in your life, you realize how much good you actually have. But it's because you're working against your brain, and it's like those three loud things, it's shouting so loudly about it that it's easy to lose sight of all the good.
Yeah, I see that.
Which is why I go back to the human brain. Man, it can be dumb sometimes.
For sure.
Like where it's just like, oh, you know what? Let's produce a little too much of some random chemical that makes you feel life might not be worth living.
Right.
Or, oh, I'm in a grocery store. There's more than 4 people in this room. Time to hit the panic button and just make you stop being able to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we should talk a little bit too about therapy.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that long ago. It was before our brokerage Christmas party that you woke up.
Right before Christmas, yeah.
It was the day of our Christmas party that you woke up in a not good place.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been out of therapy, but we always keep therapy very close.
It's
we always talk about it
never
a lot,
off the table,
right?
no.
It's never off the table going back. And so just recently you woke up and you felt not good, and we had a very big discussion as to whether or not we were going to stay home.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of really good things to point out when you're having a day that's darker. You definitely don't want to be around a lot of people.
No.
Taking you into a social setting is, like you said before, people go, well, go out, do something. As somebody that is with you most days during this process, it is not the solution to make you feel better.
Right.
If anything, a little bit more in the quiet level, having that person that you trust right by your side, I think is definitely, I can understand.
Yeah, like I'm not the guy that goes to big social events on a good day, usually. I'm comfortable with just the smaller groups.
Yeah.
So on a bad day, like instantly my thought process is I just want to be around as few people as possible. Right. Maybe like I'll be happy around you. I'd be happy around my close family. Yeah. It's probably about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So this day, we talked about whether or not we would go because I have a leadership role in the brokerage. I know that you knew that I had to, welcome people and all, do all the stuff, make sure everybody's having a good time. And you said to me, no, we're going to go.
Yeah.
Now, there was a saving grace for you is Matt and Kyla, and Angela, who are our best friends, were going.
Mm-hmm.
They were at the table with us. So you did have a lot of security
Yeah.
for you, there. But you did make the decision to go. You stayed. You
I
helped
did,
me with
yeah.
the 50-50. It was a different night.
Yeah.
It's a night where I'm like, couldn't really leave your side a whole bunch. But after that day, we woke up and we had another conversation about therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I likened it to this is I think going back to therapy is a good idea because I really believe when you have a mental health journey, as much as somebody may or may not need to be in it full time,
Mm-hmm.
your therapist really was the one that kind of launched you free and said, try it without me and see.
Yeah.
But when we talked the next day, we really talked about a recharge. It's like plugging your battery back in.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to know that there's no shame in going. And what I've witnessed with you is when I start seeing maybe those days become a little bit more, like
More
maybe you're
frequent,
having more
yeah.
frequent, there's definitely triggers that cause it. I've noticed that over the last 10 years. But I also think that always keeping therapy as an option to jump right back in is just like you recharging your controllers for your video games.
Yeah, don't
Right?
view going back to therapy if that's a decision you feel is best for you. Don't view that as a defeat, because like the head of the doctors told you, depression isn't something you cure. It's not something that goes away. Sooner or later, you're going to need help with it again.
Yeah.
So therapy is a very effective tool for helping with that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think, I might need to go back, don't view that as a failure. Think of it as a good thing that you're able to recognize that I'm not in a good place right now. Maybe therapy can set me back on the right path.
It will set you back on the right path for sure. We have kept, and from a parent point of view, we have kept a very open dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Right after that particular night, we did get a 1-800 crisis center number that was on our fridge for many, many years.
It was, yeah.
It was always the whole intent with it from the Mental Health Society is when you're in that place, always having numbers that you can easily see and pick up the phone and call. There'll always be a reminder that there's somebody there,
Mm-hmm.
right? No matter where you are.
Yeah.
You and I, about a year or so after, you were, I think, having a blue day. I wouldn't call it a dark day,
Mm-hmm.
but you were blue. And you were sleeping, and I went into your room, and I sat on the side of your bed and said, talk to me. And you just said, I'm not having a good day. And I said, okay. And you just started talking. You might not even remember this. You just started talking. And I just sat there and let you talk, get it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you started talking about that night a year ago. And the one thing that you said to me, and I was so close, Mom. And I said to you, why didn't you just do it? What was it really that made you not when others just do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that you said, I couldn't do that to you. Do you feel, Austin, that how would you explain how that was different for you than it was for other people?
Honestly, I think I was just lucky that I was at a point where I was in a very dark hole, but I was still able to see some kind of light in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of people, what it is they're just so lost in the darkness of their own lives, is that they can't see a way out anymore. When people talk about wanting to end their own lives, usually it's not really about like, I want to end my life, or it's not really thought of like that. It's just, I need what I'm feeling to stop, and I don't know how else to do it, is what oftentimes those thoughts really manifest as.
Right.
And they get desperate for it to end, and in that desperation, they make the worst mistake of their lives.
Right. Yeah.
So honestly, I think I'm grateful that I was at a point where I could still see not everything in my life was as bad
Right.
as I thought maybe it was. I still had things that I could cling on to.
Right. Yeah. Do you find that with your journey that it's a little harder for you to trust people that you don't know? Are you a little bit more protective of yourself and your space?
Well, that's actually something else that I learned about myself in therapy. What my therapist told me, and these were his exact words, were, "You are the poster child of social anxiety." So already on a good day, like I said, on top of being introverted, I've got those couple people I really connect with.
Yep.
The rest, it's like, so
You still feel that way too, right?
I still feel that way. Absolutely. Like, you see me at parties, like at a certain point, I just shut down and I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I need to leave.
You do. Even on
Yeah.
a good day.
Even on a good day. Like, it's not a depression thing. It's just like, again, it's a brain thing of like, okay, my battery's spent, get out. And that's sort of what I'm like. So when I view that sort of through depression lens, it's also, it kind of feeds onto that to a certain degree. Like, my mental health isn't something that I usually get too in depth with, but it's something I've learned through the years, is kind of coming to terms with the fact that it's a part of my life. It's a part of who I am. It doesn't define me.
No.
But it's also something that's never going to go away.
No.
So sooner or later, I'm just going to have to get comfortable with the fact that it's part of me and I got to deal with it. And that's something I learned over the years, is to be able to say, yeah, this is a part of me. So it is, sometimes I will maybe be a bit more distant, or a bit more, or just appear off sometimes, but it's a part of who I am, and I hope you understand that. And thankfully, I've been in a position where anyone I've talked to about this, for the most part, has been extremely positive and extremely supportive about it.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm thankful for the groups and the friends and the family that I do have, is that almost unanimously it's been extremely positive.
Have you started telling more people? Is it a conversation that you feel, if you meet a new friend, and I'm giving a situation,
Sure.
Maybe they're starting to become a closer friend 6 months down the road. Are you feeling like this part of your journey is something that you want to tell new people in your life?
Again, not really in like the full details, but I will tell people, like, as I'm going friends with them, like, I do mention, yeah, I do have depression. I have social anxiety. Again, social anxiety lower on the ladder, but still I do mention that I do have these mental health struggles. And I don't even mention it as like all right, here's my confession. This is me coming out to you about the struggles I've been through. Lately, I've just learned to just mention it. Like, if it happens to be a relevant topic to whatever we're talking about, I can use that as like, okay, well, I have this, and here's how I can approach that from my frame of mind. I I think it was like maybe a year after that one bad incident, which is when I went on social media and I
You did.
actually spoke about it publicly the very first time.
You did.
I gave you permission to tell like your close friends and
Yep.
obviously
Well,
our
a
family.
few. Yeah.
A few.
Yeah.
But
Not
for the
everybody.
first while, I was very, very private.
Mm-hmm.
But that was around the point where I was like, I can't be afraid of this anymore. So I just did this very long Facebook post, just going through
It was very
a bunch
good,
of it.
though. It was very,
I-
you really opened up.
I
You did.
I remember being proud of what I wrote, even if I don't remember all the specifics of it. And again, response to that was extremely positive.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess another story I had, which helped me learn to open up more about it, was there was a very brief, maybe 2-month period where I was doing work as like one of those door knockers that comes to your house at like 6 o'clock at night trying to get donations. And I was working for this facility that specializes in mental health as a contractor, really.
It was the Canadian Mental Health Society.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So it was one of my last weeks there. I was doing the door knocking. This woman opened her door, and I did, the usual speech. I talked about, hey, I'm with these people. Here are some stats. Would you like to donate? And she looked at me and she's like, come inside. And I was like, okay, we're either about to have a story or I'm about to get mugged. But I went inside, just followed my gut, and she's like, my husband passed away a couple weeks ago from depression. And we had a very long talk where I was just guiding her through it, helping her understand, like from someone with depression's perspective, what sort of leads to that. And going back to sort of what I said at the beginning, she was like, how did I miss the signs? How could I have missed that? Like, what's wrong with me? And I was like, there's nothing wrong with you. He didn't want you to know because that's what depression does to you.
Wow.
And she's like, was there anything I could have done? And I was like, honestly, and this is maybe a tough thing to hear, but it can also be the truth. A lot of it just depends on the person being able to learn to help themselves and recognize I need help before it's too late. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to before he got to that point, but that doesn't mean it's your fault for not seeing it. And she just fell into my arms and started sobbing for maybe 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I just held her and she was like, thank you so much for coming on this day.
You were meant to be there.
Yeah. And that's one of the brightest experience I took out of that job. And it's also what sort of taught me to say, you know what, be more public about this. I'd already learned that, but not just with close friends, not just with family, not just with my inner circle. Learn to be okay with sharing that to anyone, because you never know how your story and your struggles might help someone in the future. Honestly, without that story, there's a good chance we wouldn't even be doing this episode of the podcast, because that taught me the valuable lesson of, this is a period in my life that even now I don't really like reflecting on all that much, because it does represent in most ways my lowest moment. Mm-hmm. But it's also something that people can learn from, and I can learn new things from it anytime that I learn to reflect it. And if my story helps someone else, if anyone's story helps someone else, then I think it's important that I share it. And everyone has their own time when it's right to share. You shouldn't be forced to if you don't want to. It's always your story to share. But once you get to that point, never underestimate how helpful it can be to someone that might need to hear it.
You know how proud I am of you. You know how proud I am.
Well, thank you.
I know that this is not easy talking about it. on our podcast, but you are an incredible human,
Well, thank you.
and you will help someone.
Mm-hmm.
Someone will hear this, someone will relate. There is light at the end of the tunnel, but I think the takeaway, not I think, what I know what some of our takeaways are is, having family support, whether or not you can mentally relate or not, it doesn't matter. We all get down, but some feel like their life isn't worth living, others don't, but you still have to acknowledge and you have to give support, and you've got to take that person to get the help that they need.
Yeah.
Also, getting help for yourself to help the person that you're closest to overcome this is a massive takeaway.
It's absolutely massive, and in the moment, I know it's going to be the hardest possible thing to do in that moment is to say to someone, I need help. But in the end of the day, it's the right decision, because no matter what your brain is telling you, and I know for a fact your brain is telling you otherwise if you're in this position, is that there are people that want to help you, and there are resources out there that can help you. You just have to be able to push through that shroud of darkness and be able to grab it.
Or just tell one person.
Tell someone.
Austin, in that moment, you and I are blessed in that moment because you chose to come and tell me before you did the act.
Yeah.
But I would say out there that if you're feeling that way, find one person to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Because not everybody's going to be able to pick up a helpline.
No,
right?
That's fair.
But it's okay to say, here's what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
and it's imperative to get the help that you need.
Yeah. And that can be your family. That can be one of your close friends.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Someone that you know
Yep.
and that you trust.
Yep.
Because I promise you, they will be more than happy to help you out, as much as you may not want to acknowledge that maybe you need help or that you need to rely on someone else's help. But you have to. You have to. And in the end, it will be what's best for you. And
Yep.
you will realize how much good will come out of that decision.
I will talk a little bit before we end this about what I've learned. And I liked that you touched on it's that for a lot of people, they didn't recognize the signs. And you giving that example of that, the door knocking that you did for the Canadian Mental Health Association. As a parent, as somebody that has always been with her children, and it was difficult for me to go. A mother is supposed to know everything their children are feeling and thinking and doing and saying. Well, doing. Oops. Yeah, can't know everything that you're doing. And it is something that you can kind of beat yourself up over to a certain degree. I want to highlight the point is it's okay if you didn't recognize the signs. Maybe there are signs as well, and it's not okay if there are signs to pretend that those signs don't exist.
Sure.
I want to emphasize if there are signs and you're saying to yourself, I don't think they're doing okay mentally, then I think that you need to have an open conversation with whoever the person is. If there are no signs that you can see, as it was in my case, our case, I've learned to be okay with that. I think every parent, and once you have children, it does become more relatable, there's always an element of I should have known. But
Of
what I've
course.
learned, Austin, through this journey with you is there are things you can't change in life. I can't go back and live the year or two before every single day and go, was there something here? Was there something there? What I learned very quickly was I am in a moment of protecting and keeping my son alive. So if I missed, I got to let that go, because from this moment on is about making sure that you live.
Yeah.
And that wasn't easy to do, because a parent doesn't ever want their child to get to this point. And I think there's something to be said about letting the past go, moving forward in this journey with this is keeping you alive.
Yeah.
And I don't want anybody beating themselves up over something that you can't change,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And anything else maybe that you want to add?
I guess one last very important detail is that obviously this is my story, my struggle with depression and my dark thoughts. That being said, every journey and every story is unique. So talk with people who have gone through this, talk with people who know people who've gone through this, because there may be similarities, but the way I thought about things and the way I approach things and the way that we as a family approach things may not necessarily be the same as the ways others have dealt with it. And perhaps everyone will have their own ways that they've learned to get help. Maybe they'll have their own warning signs or different ways that their depression manifests. Like for me, it is sort of that hollowness, that apathy. But for other people, it can be like those extreme bouts of sadness, or even being hyper emotional, like trying too hard to be happy, things like that. There's all kinds of different ways that it can manifest. And like I said, unfortunately, we tend to be pretty good actors, so it can be tough to spot. But I think once you know what the warning signs are and how the people in your life do get triggered in those ways, you can learn from there. So learn all the stories that you can and learn what the different signs are and learn what the different ways that it appears are, because I by no means speak for everybody that has ever had depression. This is just my story, what happened with me, and how I've moved forward from there with the help of my friends and my family. And everyone else will have their own story as well, and they're just as important to listen to.
I think another takeaway can be that sometimes if the person like yourself is going through it, sometimes you want to share, sometimes you don't want to share. I think if somebody is letting you know that they're just in a dark place, but maybe they're not prepared to vomit all over you everything that's going on here. There have been times in the last 10 years where you don't want to talk, but you've been able to say, this isn't a good day.
Yeah.
And what we do is I'm just by your side.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, okay, you don't want to share. I'm physically here.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing, and I don't leave your side.
Yeah.
I, again, am maybe the proudest mother in the world. I have also learned that this is not my solo journey with you. It is very easy when you know that this person that is trusting you is confiding their deepest, darkest feelings. You know right away that you can't go and blab it to the world.
Right.
Mistakes I made was keeping it in and getting you through it without any help. And I think we ended up having a conversation where I said to you, when I was trying to get help through the different organizations to to guide you the right way. I also had a conversation with you that said, I need somebody that's my confidant, right?
Yeah.
At that time, at that particular moment, your brother was in university and ready to enter his exams. So we didn't even let your brother know that night. We didn't. You know, we didn't want to interfere with his schooling. What I've learned through the years now is when you have a day that's not good, I now let your brother know, because your brother is also your security blanket. And now, you know, you've got the additional people going, we got you.
Yeah.
Even if it's a text or a phone call, right? As was the case last December.
Yeah.
When you were really struggling, and it was, you know, we all grouped in together. And I think it's easy for somebody to think you can do this alone. But the bottom line is everybody has the same purpose, is to keep you here happy and with us.
Yeah, for sure. And something else that I think will just help is just say something nice. Just always be kind, always pay a compliment where you can, because you never know what kind of impact that can have on someone's day. You never know what kind of struggles they're dealing with. And you never know maybe if your words can completely change their perspective that day. Like, just always do your best to uplift the people around you, and for all you know, it could change their life forever.
One word can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
You know I love you.
You know I love you.
I love you.
No, I love you.
I love you more. My birth too. A little bit.
A little bit?
I love you. Okay. I'm so proud of you. At the end of this podcast, we're nearing the end now. We are going to put up some help numbers for anybody that might be in distress. Please use them. I want to encourage people. Yes, you can reach out to us if you're struggling with a journey. We're not professionals at this by any means, but we do want to make sure that everybody knows that there is somebody safe that you can always talk to. And if you're struggling and you don't have anybody, we will certainly put these numbers up. They'll be in our description as well, so that there is always somebody waiting. One dial of a number.
Yeah.
You're the best.
No, you're the best.